Snow fell like shattered glass over Chicago's magnificent Mile that night, each flake cutting through the wind like a secret. Somewhere beneath those glittering holiday lights, a 7-year-old girl sat alone on a bench, bare hands pressed to her face, knees drawn tight against her chest. Her thin jacket hung like paper. The world moved around her carols, champagne, laughter, the faint jingle of store doors. And yet no one stopped until a black Tesla slowed, and a man who'd sworn he would never care again whispered, "Stop the car. If this story grips you, already stay." Because what happened next shattered more than silence. It changed what one man believed about mercy, about love, and about the price of doing nothing. Tell me, if you saw a child alone in the snow tonight, would you keep driving, or would you stop? Ethan Cross hadn't stopped for anything in months. Not traffic lights, not memories, not grief. The billionaire tech founder moved through life like a ghost in a $1,000 coat. A year ago, he'd buried his only daughter Ava after a skiing accident that left his world frozen, even as the market soared. He'd built his fortune on predicting human behavior, but he hadn't predicted how hollow it would feel to live without her. Tonight, on Christmas Eve, he told himself he was just driving, just circling the city until the noise in his head quieted. But fate, as always, had other plans. Through the windshield he saw her, a small shape, curled at the edge of the park, where the snow gathered thick as dust. At first he thought she was sleeping. Then he saw the tremor in her fingers, the raw red skin where gloves should have been. He stepped out into the cold, the sting biting through his shoes, and approached slowly. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, keeping his voice low. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched. She clutched a crumpled paper bag to her chest, as if it held her last reason to be alive. Her lips were pale, her lashes wet with frost. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," she murmured. Aunt Carla said no police, no hospitals. Ethan froze at the words. No police, no hospitals. The sentence was too rehearsed for a child. He knelt beside her, snow soaking through his pants. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then whispered Maya. He smiled gently, forcing his voice to stay calm, even as his chest clenched. "That's a beautiful name. Maya, are you waiting for someone?" She nodded. "Mom, but she's sleeping. Aunt Carla said to wait here. She said someone would come." Ethan glanced around the park, empty, silent, except for the whir of distant traffic. Every instinct in him screamed that something was wrong. The way she said it, the way she trembled, it wasn't the cold alone. He shrugged off his overcoat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric nearly swallowed her. "Here," he said. "You look like you could use something warm." She blinked, uncertain, then peeked into her paper bag. Inside was a squashed cinnamon roll half covered in sugar. "I was saving it," she said, voice trembling. He smiled, breaking the tension with an absurd bargain. "Tell you what, trade me one bite for the coat." "Seems fair." Her eyes widened. "You'd eat that." He nodded. "If you let me." She tore off a small piece and handed it to him. The pastry was dry stale, barely sweet, but Ethan ate it as though it were the finest dessert in Chicago. "Best cinnamon roll I've had all year," he said. For the first time, Maya's lips curved into something like a smile. A tiny trembling thing, but real. Then, as if she remembered where she was, her body tensed again. "Aunt Carla said I can't sleep. She said sleeping outside is bad." Ethan looked at her, so small, so determined to obey even the cruelest instructions. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny silver bell, the one that used to hang from Ava's backpack. "This was my daughter's," he said softly. "She used to ring it whenever she needed me. If you want me close, ring it. If you want space, don't. You're the boss, okay?" Maya turned the bell in her fingers, eyes reflecting the streetlights. "It's pretty. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." He stood and held out his hand. "Come on, my driver's right there. We'll get you somewhere warm just for tonight. No police yet, just Coco. We can decide what's next after that." For a long moment she didn't move. Then slowly she reached up and took his hand. Her skin was ice against his palm. As they crossed the street, Ethan noticed a flicker of light from across the park. A cell phone lifted by unseen hands filming. A woman's voice whispered into the camera, thick with fake sobs. "They took her. That man took my niece." He didn't hear it, at least not yet. Inside the car, the heat filled the air, fogging the windows. Maya clutched the bell in one hand, the paper bag in the other. Ethan watched her reflection in the glass, the bell glinting like a promise he didn't yet understand. "What's your mom's name, Maya?" he asked gently. "Lena," she whispered. "She's in the hospital. Aunt Carla says the doctors made her sick." Ethan felt something inside him shift, a mix of anger, grief, and something else he hadn't felt since Ava's funeral. Purpose. He pulled out his phone, hesitating only for a second before dialing. "Mrs. Ortega," he said when his housekeeper answered. "Prep the guest room. Turn on the fireplace. I'm bringing someone home." As the car rolled through the falling snow, Maya leaned against the seat, her eyes fluttering shut at last. The bell slipped from her fingers and chimed once, a faint but clear. Ethan looked down at it, that tiny note of silver sound, and made a silent vow, one he hadn't dared make since the day he lost his daughter. This time he wouldn't fail. If you felt that moment in your chest drop a comment, would you have stopped for Maya? Because what's coming next will test how far one man will go to protect a child who was never meant to be his, and how one little bell could expose a secret darker than the Chicago night. The emergency room was too bright for midnight. Fluorescent lights hummed above white tile, the air sharp with antiseptic, and the quiet panic that always lived in hospital corridors. Ethan Cross sat in the far corner of the pediatric wing, his overcoat draped around the little girl now curled in a hospital blanket. She looked even smaller under the sterile light, her thin arms marked by faint bruises that no child should ever carry. Dr. Sienna Patel moved with the calm precision of someone who'd seen too many nights like this. "Mild hypothermia," she murmured, pressing a stethoscope to Maya's chest, her heart's steady lungs clear. "But these bruises—" She stopped, tracing the pattern with a frown. "They're not random." She turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cross, how did you find her in the park?" he said quietly. She was alone. Said her step-aunt told her to wait. Dr. Patel's eyes flickered with restrained anger. "You did the right thing bringing her here. We'll need to report this." The words struck him harder than expected. Report. He'd spent the last year avoiding systems, courts, hospitals, the machinery that had failed his daughter when she needed it most. But looking at Maya's shivering form, he realized the choice wasn't about his comfort anymore. Minutes later, a woman in a gray wool coat entered with a clipboard and a steady, composed face. "Tiana Brooks, Child Protective Services," she introduced herself. Her voice was firm but kind, the kind of tone that asked for truth without demanding it. "I understand you're the one who found her." Ethan nodded. "She said her mom's in the hospital, name's Lena Quinn. Her step-aunt's been caring for her." Tiana took notes quickly. "And you're not related, no. Just—" I stopped the car. She gave a brief knowing smile. That was enough. Sometimes it just takes one person to stop. She knelt beside Maya, who peered out from the blanket with wary eyes. "Hey there, sweetheart. My name's Tiana. I'm here to make sure you're safe." "Can I ask you a few questions?" Maya hesitated, clutching the tiny silver bell Ethan had given her. "You're not a cop." "No, honey. I'm a helper, like a teacher who works at night." That earned a faint nod. Tiana's questions came gently, where she lived, who was home, what her mother was like. When she asked about the bruises, Maya didn't answer. She just stared at the floor and whispered, "Aunt Carla said not to tell. She said the rules don't help girls like me." The sentence froze everyone in the room. Tiana's pen stilled. Dr. Patel's jaw tightened. Ethan felt his hands curl into fists. When Maya was settled into a hospital bed, Tiana pulled Ethan aside. "We'll open an emergency placement file. For tonight, she can't go back to that address, but she's terrified of being separated again. She mentioned you by name, said she trusts you. If you're willing, CPS can authorize temporary placement under supervision." Ethan hesitated. "I'm not a guardian. I don't know how this works." "I'll walk you through it," Tiana said. "We call it an emergency foster arrangement. You'd care for her overnight with a follow-up evaluation in the morning. Everything under our oversight." Ethan's instinct was to step back to let professionals handle it, to keep emotional distance like he always did. But then he saw Maya's hand twitching at her side, the bell glinting between her fingers. Ava had once done that too, played with small things when she was scared. "Okay," he said. "She can stay with me tonight." Tiana nodded, signing the first of many forms. "We'll need a safe environment, food, and supervision, and no contact with her step-aunt until further notice." She glanced at him meaningfully. "We've had cases where relatives try to interfere." Ethan almost smiled. "Mrs. Ortega will handle the supervision part. She runs my house better than I do." By the time they left the hospital, the snow had turned to fine mist. The city glowed under street lamps, the roads nearly empty. Maya slept in the back seat, her small head resting against the car door. Ethan watched her reflection in the glass, the bell still clutched in her hand. When they arrived at his penthouse, Mrs. Ortega was already waiting in her robe and slippers. "You look like trouble followed you home," she said, but her voice softened when she saw the child. "Come, Nina. Warm bath first, then milk, then bed." Maya blinked up at her uncertain, but followed without protest. Ethan stood in the foyer, surrounded by the quiet hum of central heating and the faint scent of cinnamon from the kitchen. For the first time in a year, the house didn't feel like a museum. It felt like something waking up. While Mrs. Ortega bathed and tucked Maya in, Tiana finished her paperwork at the kitchen counter. "I know you're not used to this," she said, sliding him a document, "but she'll need consistency. If you agree to keep her for the next 72 hours while we locate her mother's file that could help stabilize her." Ethan read the form, all legal jargon and liability clauses. 72 hours, he repeated. "That's all, for now," Tiana said. "We'll see what the morning brings." He signed. "And her mother. Any news?" Tiana looked up from her notes. "Lena Quinn. We found an active hospital record car accident 3 weeks ago. She's still in intensive care." Ethan's throat tightened. He could almost hear Maya's words again. "She's sleeping." When Tiana left, the penthouse went quiet, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Ethan walked to the guest room door and stood there for a long time watching Maya sleep. Her small hand rested on the pillow, the silver bell glinting under the lamp. He thought about his daughter again, the one promise he'd failed to keep, to always come when she called. He hadn't been there when Ava's ski instructor dialed for help, hadn't reached her in time. And now, here was another child ringing a different kind of bell. In his study, he opened his laptop and transferred a small fortune into a legal escrow account under Maya's name, managed by the court. It wasn't about charity. It was about boundaries. If he was going to protect her, he wanted to do it cleanly, without blurring lines or headlines. Mrs. Ortega appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're doing it again," she said softly. "Doing what? Trying to fix the world with money. Maybe she doesn't need a billionaire. Maybe she just needs someone who doesn't leave." Ethan looked at her, too tired to argue. "I'm not sure I know how to stay anymore." She stepped closer. Then start by staying until morning." He nodded, and for the first time since the accident that had taken his daughter, he let someone else's words hold him still. As he turned off the lights, the faint jingle of the silver bell drifted from down the hall, soft, uncertain, but enough. He walked toward it, toward the small sound that had somehow thawed the ice inside him. Somewhere beyond that door, a child who'd been beaten, abandoned, and silenced was finally sleeping in warmth. And somewhere deep down, Ethan knew this wasn't just one night. It was the beginning of something he didn't yet have the courage to name. By morning, the city had thawed into a haze of gray slush and exhaust. From the window of his office, Ethan Cross watched Chicago crawl back to life. People, rushing horns, blaring the machinery of normalcy, grinding on as if nothing had changed. But something had. Down the hall, Maya's soft laughter floated through the penthouse as Mrs. Ortega showed her how to make pancakes shaped like stars. For the first time in months, the sound of a child in his home didn't ache. It warned him instead because comfort could make you forget danger. That danger had a name, Carla Vale. Tiana Brooks had called at dawn. "We reached the aunt," she said. "She's volatile. Claims you kidnapped the girl for publicity. Don't engage, Mr. Cross. Let the system handle it." Ethan thanked her and hung up, though his gut told him systems moved too slowly for predators like Carla. By noon, the proof arrived. A video surfaced online, Carla, standing in front of a pawn shop, face streaked with tears, claiming her poor niece had been stolen by a billionaire. The clip racked up thousands of views in hours. Ethan's phone buzzed nonstop, journalists, investors, PR advisors begging him to respond. He didn't. He only whispered to Mrs. Ortega, "Keep the doors locked," and called an old number he hadn't used in years. Miles Rourke, a gravel voice answered. "I need you on something fast," Ethan said. "A woman named Lena Quinn, hospitalized after a crash 3 weeks ago. Her sister Carla Vale has custody of Lena's daughter Maya, but I don't think that crash was an accident." There was silence on the line, then a low exhale. "You always did pick the messy ones. I'll call you tonight." By sundown, Miles was parked in a rented sedan outside a city impound lot. The former homicide detective still moved like a man who trusted no one, not even his own shadow. He bribed the night clerk $50 for access to traffic archives and spent 2 hours combing through footage from the night of the crash. When he found it, he swore under his breath. The tunnel camera caught Lena's sedan in perfect focus center lane, speed steady, until a dark car edged up beside it, nudged the rear quarter, and vanished into the tunnel shadows as Lena's vehicle spun into concrete. No skid marks, no brake lights. A clean, deliberate hit. Miles froze, the frame zoomed in, and saw the telltale scar of mismatched gray paint on the other car's bumper. He called Ethan. "You were right, it was no accident. Someone pushed her." Ethan's voice hardened. "Find out who." Miles didn't need long. By midnight, he tracked Carla's pawn slips through a shop on the south side. She'd been selling jewelry, Lena's jewelry, every few days. When she walked in that night, he was already inside pretending to browse old records. She placed a velvet box on the counter, whispering urgently to the clerk, unaware of the small recorder hidden in Miles's pocket. "I need this gone fast," Carla said. "Same story?" the clerk asked. "Yeah. Sister in a coma, bills to pay. Once she's gone, it's all mine anyway." The words tightened Miles's jaw, but it was the next voice that sealed it. Low, male, amused. "Easy, babe," said a man stepping from the shadows, his leather jacket slick with grease. "You start talking like that, someone's gonna think you planned it." "Shut up, Trent," she hissed. Miles's recorder caught every word. "You did the driving, remember? You said 1 tap she'd spin. Now you're nervous." The man Trent Voss laughed, mean and careless. "Not nervous. Just don't want anyone finding the car before I repaint the bumper." That was enough. Miles slipped out quietly, his hand steady on the recorder in his pocket. Outside, the neon light flickered over his car's hood, casting everything in a sickly yellow. He leaned against the door, eyes narrowing. Carla Vale had lied about everything guardianship money, the accident. And now her greed had put a child in harm's way. Back at the penthouse, Ethan tried to act normal. Maya sat at the kitchen table, coloring a snow leopard on a scrap of paper, while Mrs. Ortega baked gingerbread men. "Who's that one for?" he asked, nodding toward the cookie missing a leg. "For Mom," Maya said softly, "when she wakes up." He smiled faintly. "And this one?" He pointed to another missing an arm. "That's me," she said, proud despite the imperfection. "But I'm still standing." Her words pierced him. In that moment, Ethan knew why he couldn't walk away. Grief had built walls around his heart, but this little girl, broken brave alive, was cracking them one smile at a time. His phone buzzed again. "Miles?" "I've got them on tape," the detective said. "Carla and her boyfriend. They planned it. She sells the mother's things while he hides the car. I even got their voices talking about money from state checks. You'll have proof by morning." Ethan's pulse steadied. "Good work. Send it straight to CPS and Detective Alvarez. No leaks." Miles hesitated. "You're making enemies with people who have nothing to lose." "I've already lost everything," once Ethan said. "They can't take what's left." After the call, he found Maya asleep on the couch, one arm around a stuffed bear, the other still holding her drawing. He knelt beside her, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "You're safe, kiddo. I promise." Across town, Miles parked near a dimly lit garage and snapped photos through a crack in the corrugated door. Trent Voss was there, bent over a car with a spray gun. The rear bumper gleamed under the fluorescent lights, fresh primer, the same gray he'd seen in the footage. Miles took 3 shots, zoomed in on the mismatched paint, and drove away with the evidence. That night, as snow began to fall again, Ethan poured a cup of coffee he wouldn't drink. On the counter lay the silver bell. He picked it up and listened to its faint chime. Somewhere inside that sound was a promise the truth was coming, and when it did, he would be ready. Out on the street, wind whipped through the city's steel canyons. A woman's voice echoed faintly from a phone camera, rehearsed and pitiful. "He stole her from me." My niece. But the lens caught something else behind her, Trent's smirk, too proud, too careless. The camera never lies. By morning, their lies wouldn't either. Snow drifted over the courthouse steps in slow, deliberate spirals, coating the gray stone with a thin layer of white. Inside, the warmth of bodies couldn't touch the chill that hung over the room. The air was thick with whispered judgments and the scratch of pens across legal pads. At the defense table sat Carla Vale, dressed in black, as if mourning the very soul she'd sold. Her lawyer leaned close, rehearsing sympathy for the woman the internet still pitied. Across the aisle, Ethan Cross stood beside Tiana Brooks and Mrs. Ortega, his hands clasped behind his back, the faint chime of a silver bell still echoing in his mind. Judge Marion O'Keefe's gavel struck once. This hearing is now in session. Tiana stepped forward, her voice measured but edged with steel. "Your Honor, the evidence presented by Child Protective Services shows clear neglect, physical harm, and financial exploitation. The minor, Maya Quinn, was found abandoned in freezing temperatures under the custody of her step-aunt, Miss Vale, who profited from selling her comatose sister's belongings." Carla's lawyer rose. "Objection. My client acted out of desperation. She believed her sister's condition was hopeless. She took temporary guardianship to protect the child." Judge O'Keefe looked over her glasses. By abandoning her in the snow, the lawyer faltered. Tiana continued, "Your Honor, We've also obtained a recording courtesy of investigator Miles Rourke capturing Ms. Vale and her accomplice Trent Voss discussing how Ms. Vale would own the child and benefit financially from her sister's accident. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Carla stiffened, the color draining from her face. "That recording is fake," she hissed. The judge gestured toward the bailiff. "Play it." The courtroom fell silent as the tape began. Carla's voice filled the air, clear and unmistakable. "Once she's gone custody, papers are ironclad. Maya becomes mine. With her, the checks, the sympathy, all of it." Then came Trent's low chuckle. "You start talking like that, someone's going to think you planned it. Shut up, Trent. You did the driving." The final sentence hit like a hammer. When the playback ended, even Carla's lawyer stepped away from her. Judge O'Keefe took a long breath before speaking. "Ms. Vale, this court finds sufficient cause for criminal referral. Charges include child endangerment fraud and conspiracy to commit assault. Custodial rights are revoked effective immediately." Carla stood abruptly, voice breaking. "You don't understand. I was just trying to survive. My sister left me with nothing. That kid, she doesn't even know who I am." Ethan's voice cut through the air, calm but sharp. "She knows enough to be afraid of you." Carla turned toward him, eyes wild. "And who are you?" "Some rich man trying to buy redemption." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The judge's gavel struck again. "Remove her from the courtroom." As officers led Carla out, her voice echoed down the corridor, high and shrill. "You'll regret this. You all will." Then the door shut and silence took its place. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Cross, Miss Brooks, where is the child now?" Tiana answered. "Safe at Mr. Cross's residence under CPS supervision." "Good," said Judge O'Keefe. "Let's keep it that way until her mother's condition changes. Speaking of which, any update?" That question carried them to the next morning, when Ethan found himself standing in the ICU of Chicago General. The steady beeping of machines filled the space, a mechanical heartbeat that refused to give up. Lena Quinn lay still, a thin woman framed by tubes and soft light. Maya's crayon drawings covered the wall, stick figures holding hands under blue skies. Ethan stayed by the door. He didn't know what to say to a woman who'd lost everything. He wasn't family. He wasn't even supposed to be here. But something inside him needed to witness her survival. Tiana entered quietly with Dr. Patel. "She's showing neurological improvement," the doctor said. "If she responds to voices, it could help." Tiana nodded toward him. "Talk to her, Mr. Cross." He hesitated. "I wouldn't know where to start." "Start with the truth." He stepped closer. "Lena," he said softly, "your daughter's safe. She's warm. She's laughing again." Her eyelids fluttered. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but enough for Dr. Patel to whisper, "She heard you." He tried again. "Carla's been arrested. The people who hurt you, they can't touch Maya anymore." This time, Lena's lips moved. A breath escaped, fractured but real. "Maya." Her eyes opened, weak but alive. Tears blurred his vision as he reached for the call button. Hours later, Tiana stood beside him in the hallway, her expression softened by something like relief. "She's out of the coma," she said. "We'll arrange a mother-child meeting once she's stable. The court will need a formal statement, but this changes everything." When Ethan returned home that night, Maya ran to him the moment he stepped inside. "Did you see Mom?" she asked. He crouched down, meeting her eyes. "I did. She's waking up Maya." She gasped, "For real, for real." Mrs. Ortega wiped her eyes with her apron. "God is good," she whispered. Ethan nodded, though part of him knew goodness took more than faith. It took fight, and the fight wasn't over yet. The press had already begun spinning the story, Tech Billionaire Rescues Child in Custody Scandal. He didn't care. Let them print what they wanted. For once, the truth didn't need a headline. It was standing in his living room, holding a silver bell, waiting for her mother to come home. 2 weeks later, Judge O'Keefe called one final hearing to confirm placement. Lena sat beside her daughter, pale but upright, her hand clasping Maya's tightly. Ethan watched from behind them, unseen but unforgotten. When the judge asked Lena if she wanted Mr. Cross to remain part of Maya's support circle, she didn't hesitate. "He already is," she said. The gavel came down softly, not with the sound of punishment this time, but of closure. Outside, the snow had stopped. The air carried that rare stillness Chicago only offered after a storm, quiet, forgiving, new. Ethan walked toward his car, the city lights reflecting off the windshield like stars. In his pocket, the silver bell chimed, once faint but clear, as if reminding him that some promises like the one he made to a little girl in the snow don't end with verdicts. They begin there. A year had passed since the night Ethan Cross stopped his car in the snow. Chicago was draped in winter again, but this time the cold didn't feel cruel. Inside his penthouse, the air smelled of cinnamon and pine, of cocoa and laughter, the kind of sounds and scents that used to haunt him, but now healed him. The Christmas tree shimmered in the corner, wrapped in paper ornaments and crooked stars cut by small, eager hands. Maya was humming as she hung another ornament, a red heart with glittered letters spelling family. She stood on a stool, her hair tied in a messy braid, her concentration fierce, as if the entire tree depended on her. "Perfect," Ethan said quietly behind her, steadying her back with one hand. She turned, beaming. "I made 3 hearts this year," she announced proudly. "One for me, one for Mom, and one for you." He smiled, the kind of soft smile that carried both gratitude and disbelief. "That's one more than last year. That's because we're bigger now," she said, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Across the room, Lena Quinn stirred a pot of cocoa on the stove. Her body was still marked by faint scars, her gait slower, but her strength had returned in quiet, steady waves. The hospital gown was long gone, replaced by a red sweater and the piece of someone who'd clawed her way back from darkness. She glanced over her shoulder at the two of them, the man and the child who'd once been strangers, and smiled. "She's right, you know. We are bigger." Mrs. Ortega entered with a tray of cookies, muttering in Spanish about too much sugar and not enough vegetables, though her eyes glowed with affection. "All families grow," she said, setting the tray down. "Even the ones that start by accident." Ethan laughed softly, "Especially those." As the evening settled, music filled the space, the low hum of a Christmas carol playing from the grand piano that had once gathered dust. Ethan sat at the bench, his hands moving carefully across the keys. Maya perched beside him, her small voice filling in the words he didn't sing. When she missed a note, she giggled. When he missed one, she nudged him with mock seriousness. "Play it right, Mr. Cross," she said, mimicking Mrs. Ortega's tone. He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." When the song ended, Lena leaned in the doorway, eyes glassy. "That was her favorite," she said softly. Ethan nodded. Ava loved it too. The silence that followed wasn't painful anymore. It was gentle, like the quiet between verses of a song. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the cocoa mugs rinsed, they all gathered near the fireplace. The room flickered gold shadows dancing across the walls. Maya curled under a blanket, her head resting against Ethan's shoulder. The silver bell, the same one he'd given her a year ago, hung from the mantel beside a photo of the 3 of them. "Do you remember when you gave me that bell?" Maya asked sleepily. Ethan chuckled. "I remember you thought it was silly. I thought you were," she corrected, "but it worked. You said to ring it if I needed you, so I did." She looked up at him. "You came." "I told you I would," he said. She smiled, fighting the pull of sleep. "You didn't break your promise." Her words hit something deep inside him, that place where guilt used to live. He thought of Ava, of how he'd failed to save her, of how the sound of a bell had once haunted him in dreams. But now it wasn't a ghost. It was Grace. When Maya finally drifted off, Lena whispered, "You gave her back what I couldn't, safety." Ethan shook his head. "You gave her the kind of love that made her worth saving." Lena watched him for a moment, then said quietly, "You know she talks about you like you're part of us now." He smiled faintly. "I thought I already was." "You are?" she said. And not just to her. For the first time, there was no tension in her words, only truth. The clock chimed midnight. Outside, church bells began to ring their sound, soft but certain, echoing across the frozen skyline. Ethan stood and crossed to the window, watching snow fall in ribbons of white light. For years, he had hated this view. It had been too empty, too silent. Now, it was alive again. Lena joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every day," he admitted. "I used to think it was about saving her, but now I know it saved me too." She nodded. Maybe that's how healing works. You reach out for someone else, and somewhere along the way you pull yourself out too. He turned to look at her, his voice low. "I didn't expect to find a family again." "Neither did I," she said. "But maybe that's the point. The best ones aren't found, they're built." In the quiet, the fire popped, scattering embers like tiny stars. Ethan reached up and gave the silver bell a small tap. Its chime filled the room clear and sweet, a sound that carried memory and hope in equal measure. Maya stirred on the couch, her voice drowsy. "Did the bell ring?" Ethan smiled. "Yeah, kiddo, just making sure it still works." "Good," she mumbled, half asleep. "Keep it close." He glanced at Lena, who mouthed, "Always." Outside, the storm softened into flurries, the city lights blurring behind the falling snow. Inside, the three of them sat wrapped in warmth that had taken a year to build and a lifetime to deserve. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the quiet fill him, letting the bell's echo settle in his chest. It wasn't the family he'd lost, it wasn't the life he once planned, but it was real, and it was his. And as the night deepened and the fire burned low, the bell above the mantel rang once more, not in sorrow, but in promise. The kind of promise you don't break. A year ago, Ethan Cross was a man drowning in silence. His wealth vast, his heart hollow, his faith in humanity buried beneath loss. He believed some wounds never healed, only scarred over. But one freezing night on the streets of Chicago changed everything. A little girl named Maya, bruised and trembling, shattered the walls he had built to survive. What began as an act of compassion became a journey of redemption. Through each trial, courts, secrets, betrayal, and truth. Ethan learned that saving someone doesn't always mean heroism. Sometimes it simply means staying when everyone else walks away. Lena Quinn, a mother fighting her way back from the edge of death, showed that love can endure even through pain and distance. And Maya, a child once abandoned in the snow, became the living proof that innocence, when protected, can reignite even the coldest hearts. Together, they built something unplanned but powerful, a family not bound by blood but by choice. The silver bell that once symbolized a lost daughter became the sound of second chances, ringing softly through a home reborn from grief. The story of Ethan, Lena, and Maya reminds us that healing doesn't come from forgetting the past, but from transforming it. Grief can harden us, or it can teach us to feel again. Sometimes life brings people together, not by coincidence, but by purpose. The broken find the broken, and together they learn how to mend. In a world that moves too fast to notice the quiet cries for help, this story asks one simple question: would you stop? Because one small act of kindness, one moment of courage can change an entire lifetime for someone else and for you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more stories that remind the world compassion still matters and hope still wins. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest bell can make the loudest sound.